Hey, Techno Studs. At this point, we've already talked a lot about tunnels, and we talked about encrypting the traffic so that way it's secure. Well, essentially, that's a virtual private network. It's creating a network, and it's virtually private because it's encrypted between the two. However, there's a few nuances that we need to know about VPNs and what they look like. So in this video, let's get into VPNs. Originally, if a company wanted to connect two of their sites together, what they would have to do is they'd have to lease the lines in between. They would actually have access to the physical lines in between the two networks, and they'd set it up. And so you can get leased lines even to this day. In fact, there's something called dark fiber, where when a company lays down fiber, they'll lay down a lot of strands of fiber, and then you could lease one of those fibers to have connectivity between your two sites. However, this can be very expensive. To support remote users, what you'd have is a server with a bank of modems on it. And these users would call into one of the modems and connect to the server to gain access to the network. Over time, the internet became more and more popular. Companies were connecting their businesses to the internet. Same thing with home users were connecting more and more to the internet as well. So now we have this connectivity through the internet that we can get to so many more machines. But the problem is now security. Any traffic that's being sent back and forth between these different sites can cause a problem because it can be seen by anybody who has access to the internet and can see the traffic going across the internet. The solution for this is VPNs. VPNs allow us to use the internet and other unsecure connections, but still link two networks together. So we create essentially one network here. That's the network part of this. And it's virtually private. It goes across public lines, but it's virtually private because it's encrypted. So let's look at some of the benefits of VPN. The first benefit is just the cost. These companies and users already have access to the internet. So it's using a connection that's already there, and you don't have to lease extra lines in order to create secure communication. But they're also more secure because even if we were to lease lines, the idea is that no one else has access to those lines. But somebody could tap into the lines and start listening to conversations. So even if we lease lines nowadays, we probably still want to encrypt that traffic and create a VPN there. It's also very scalable because we can really quickly adapt. We can go from coffee shop to coffee shop and town to town and still have connectivity into the site no matter where we're at. And then there's also this compatibility. With leased lines, you're kind of stuck with whatever leased lines are available to you. But when we have something like a VPN, it doesn't matter what type of connectivity we have, we can create that VPN connection across it for that secure communication. There are a couple different types of VPN types. One of them is site to site. If a company has two sites here and they want to connect them together, that would be considered a site-to-site VPN connection. Versus a remote access connection would be just an end user that needs to connect into the network. And in this case right here, there's a client and there's a clientless type where you can connect in to the company network. Now there's actually quite a few different ways that we can set up VPNs, but they're really the two primary ways that we secure the communication is either through IPsec or SSL/TLS. IPsec, as we saw in another video, we add a layer 3 header to what already exists, at least when we're in our tunnel mode. So in tunnel mode, which is the more common of the two, we add this extra header to this and we encrypt this part of the packet. Now SSL/TLS works quite a bit different. It encrypts it at the payload area right here. So it's a transport layer security and it does it at this upper application layer. It doesn't do it at this lower layer right here. Typically what we see is when we're creating a site-to-site VPN, we'll use IPsec for that. However, if we're going from a remote user to a site, then typically that would be set up as a SSL/TLS connection. Let's get a little more into what a remote connection looks like. Let's say we have a user offsite that needs to connect into the network. And these two sites have a site-to-site VPN, but this remote user needs access. So how do we get remote access? Well, one way is we could set up a client on the machine. So we would install a little client here, and perhaps they have to manually sign into that. So they would open up the client, they would log into the client, and then it would make a connection to the end user. And that's a lot of times that's done through SSL/TLS. But there's also a clientless method. And that would be where you're not installing an extra client on the machine. Instead, you bring up a browser, and within the browser, it would make a connection. Now, it's very limited on what you can use with this because everything is done through that browser. So it's got to be done through the standard HTTPS protocol, which uses SSL/TLS. So if you're using the clientless method, then it's definitely the SSL/TLS method of connecting, but you don't have to install software on the machine. However, it is a little more limiting.